Welcome to today's podcast. And today we're going to talk about when you become the emotional regulator and what it costs you. I'm talking to the Cassandra Syndrome sufferers out there who may be married to someone on the autism spectrum. That's what this channel is about, healing from trauma in the form of emotional deprivation. Now, many women wrote in saying, somehow I've become the one responsible for everyone's emotional stability, and I don't know how to stop that. I'm sure that resonates with most of the listeners of this channel. So if you feel like you've managed the emotional temperature of your home, you think ahead so things don't fall apart, you carry tension so others don't have to, you rarely get to just be you, then this episode is for you. So today we're talking about how the neurotypical wives can slowly become the emotional regulator in their marriage, why it happens so subtly, and why it eventually costs more than it gives. Now, I'm big on grounding moments, which is just to take a pause, try to reduce muscle tension in your body, and breathe. This is very important for people who have been traumatized. So pause with me now, please. Just let your shoulders drop. Notice your breath. You don't need to hold anything together right now. I just want you to focus on relaxing. Now, the questions in this episode came from women who said something along the lines of, I feel like the emotional adult in the relationship. And, I'm basically exhausted. I feel like I'm my autistic husband's mother too often. So if that feels familiar, let's begin. And here's question one, and all of these questions have been summarized. What does it mean to be the emotional regulator? Okay. Well, being the emotional regulator means you become the person who monitors emotional shifts, anticipates reactions, prevents meltdowns or shutdowns. You soften yourself to keep the peace. You kind of absorb the emotional fallout. So you don't just respond, you kind of preempt. And this role usually comes from perhaps being overly responsible. There's some codependency involved in there. And this role usually forms quietly, not by decision, but by adaptation. So again, grounding moment. If you immediately recognize yourself there, let's pause. Breath. Recognition is not blame, it's just awareness. One listener wrote in, she says, I feel like I'm always managing myself so he doesn't get overwhelmed. And here's some subsequent questions based on that overall theme. How did I end up in this role without realizing it? Well, because early on you learned what worked. You noticed your emotions overwhelmed him. Conflict led to shutdown. Calm kept things functional. You were better at repair work than he was. So you adjusted. And then you adjusted again, and then you adjusted some more. So over time, this adaptation almost became your identity. Now, you didn't choose control, you chose connection. Another grounding moment. If you've forgotten what it feels like to express freely, let's pause right now. That forgetting was gradual, by the way, and it was you trying to be protective. Okay, many women ask this question with exhaustion. And this has been summarized. Why am I always the one calming things down? Because you have more emotional range and flexibility than your ASD spouse does. That's strength, but it's also one-sided, and it becomes a burden over time. You hold emotional awareness, emotional repair, emotional responsibility, And eventually your nervous system pays the price. Most of the Cassandra Syndrome sufferers that I work with, they have autoimmune disease, anxiety, depression. They don't feel well. Grounding moment. If you feel tired hearing this, let that tiredness speak. You've been carrying too much load. One listener wrote, if I fall apart, everything will. So here's question 4. Why does it feel dangerous to stop regulating? The answer is because your body learned that you are the stabilizer. If you stop, who will soothe your ASD spouse? Who will prevent escalation? Who will keep things running? So you stay vigilant even when you're depleted. And this isn't strength, it's hyper-responsibility. Okay? Grounding moment. If you feel tense right now, let's pause. Breath. Constant readiness is not safety. Now, several women ask this next question with sadness. What is this doing to me emotionally? Over time, emotional regulation without reciprocity usually leads to emotional numbness, anxiety, depression, loss of self, resentment. And then you feel guilty for being resentful. It's such a lose-lose-lose here. You still function, but you don't feel alive. And because this role looks like competence, your pain often goes unnoticed. Grounding moment again. Breathe with me. If you've been telling yourself, I should be able to handle this, let's pause right now. Survival is not thriving. One listener asked this next question very quietly. Why do I feel invisible even though I do so much? Because emotional labor is often unseen, especially when it prevents problems rather than creates them. When things stay calm, no one asks how much effort it took. Your work is invisible precisely because it's effective. But invisibility erodes the self. Another grounding moment, please. If you've been longing to be seen without having to explain, let's pause. That longing is valid. Breath. Many women ask this next question with fear. What happens if I stop regulating? Well, at first there's going to be discomfort, possibly chaos, possibly guilt. But there's also going to be clarity, honesty, self-presence. So stopping doesn't mean abandoning the relationship. It means returning responsibility where it belongs. You just can't regulate another adult forever without losing yourself. And most of you who are listening to this video right now, you've lost yourself a long time ago. Many NT wives say, I've turned into somebody that I never thought I would turn into. I don't even like who I've become. Ground. If this feels both relieving and terrifying, let's pause. Both reactions are honest. Breath. One listener asked this next question with shame. Does stepping back make me selfish or uncaring? No, it makes you human. Caring does not require self-sabotage. Love does not require emotional martyrdom. Okay? You can be compassionate without being consumed. A lot of the ladies that I work with, they have what I would call toxic guilt. Guilt for putting up with this. Guilt for complaining about this. Guilt for thinking that they need too much or that they're not enough. We have to stop that. So if guilt arises, let's pause again. Self-care is not abandonment. This is especially hard for empaths to hear, and codependents to hear, and people with childhood trauma to hear. Breath. Now, several women ask this next question, or a version of it, with grief. Who am I if I stop holding everything together? Now that's a real question. You may discover grief for who you've been, anger for what you carried, relief you didn't expect, a self you haven't made yet. So stepping out of the regulator role doesn't answer everything, but it certainly gives you agency. Now, if you feel uncertain, let's pause. Not knowing is part of reclaiming yourself. One listener asked this final question with honesty. What is one small step I can take right now? It's a great question. My answer would be stop doing one thing you do purely to manage someone else's emotions. Just one. Notice what comes up, what doesn't collapse, what returns to you. Okay? Change doesn't start with confrontation. It starts with reallocation of energy. And you have wasted a bunch of sanity and energy trying to fix the unfixable. This has to stop. Now, if you've been the emotional backbone of your marriage, I want you to hear this. You didn't become the regulator because you were weak. You did it because you're capable, caring, and adaptive. But no one thrives while carrying everything alone. Now, in the next episode, we'll talk about anxiety and depression, not as personal flaws, but as, we'll just call it nervous system signals in this dynamic. So until then, I want you to be gentle with yourself. You were never meant to hold an entire relationship together by yourself. Now, before you leave me, I want to ask a few reflection questions. Where did you take responsibility for emotions that aren't yours? What did you suppress to keep things stable? What would stepping back slightly feel like in your body? Where are you exhausted but still showing up anyway? And what truth feels clearer after listening to this podcast? No action required yet. Awareness is enough for today. Now, if this video resonated, please like, subscribe, and please comment. Please share your story. I read and respond to all comments. Thanks for listening to today's podcast, and God bless. I have a book available on Amazon for those of you who want to recover from Cassandra Syndrome. The link will be in the description as well as pinned in the comments section. If you are a neurotypical wife in a marriage with an ASD level 1 husband and you feel like you're suffering from Cassandra Syndrome, then there's going to be a link below this video in the description area and also pinned in the comment section that will take you to my Cassandra Syndrome recovery group. We meet 1 hour a week for 4 weeks. I hope to see you in that group.